And we have to take personal responsibility, because being the victim and blaming the system and blaming other people and blaming our families, that's never going to get us unstuck.
Hello, amigos. It's Celeste Leon, and welcome back to the Light to Success podcast, a place where we can discuss how to strengthen our mindset, increase our confidence, and maintain a high level of motivation to reach the next level of success in our lives. So, let's get started. Welcome back, everybody, to the Light to Success podcast, season 2. I'm so excited to be back with new energy, new excitement, to keep working on my purpose for all of you here on the podcast. And what's really exciting is that I am now launching also my YouTube channel. So you can now start listening to these episodes on YouTube or watching them, actually. So I hope that you like that, and I always want to hear your feedback. And today, I'm really excited to introduce this incredible guest. His name is Robert Joseph. He's an author, speaker, and men's coach who created the NSM method for men. After working in business and sales for over 15 years, he witnessed many men drifting away from their core and abandoning their strength. So now Robert has developed this method to help men find their purpose by connecting with their spirituality and nature. I love reading his work. His mindset is truly one of a kind, and I can't wait for you to listen to him more. But to begin this conversation, I actually want to read to you one of his incredible poems. And you should all follow him on Instagram so you can get to read more of these as well. His poem is called My Ruins. So here it goes. My old home has burned down. I did it with my own flame. I had plenty to burn, so I sparked it with some shame. Then I threw in fear and sadness. The fire began to rise. Some pain and regret made the flames dance with the skies. My old home has burned down. Some would call it an offense. The home couldn't hold me anymore. It no longer made sense. I never thought I'd set myself on fire. It was never my plan. But this home had to be destroyed so I could become a man. I danced around this crumbling home that was once all mine and started building my kingdom with the most mighty design. I honored my home for its shelter and shaky foundation. And I prayed over the debris and showered it with libations. I built this with my own hands. It was hard to see it exhaust. Like a runaway dog, in order to be found, I had to be lost. I stand knee deep in these ashes. The fire is now inside. Don't come looking for me at this home. I no longer reside. I am moving mountains and searching for sacred grounds to build an estate for kings who will soon claim their crowns. I'll wait a second here to let that sink in. I think it is so powerful, so beautifully written, so much depth into this writing. So I'll let you share some thoughts there, Robert, and thank you again for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for digging up that poem. I almost forgot that I wrote it, and it means a lot of things to me. I won't get too deep, but I think it'll probably frame the conversation that I think we'll have today about our own evolution as humans. In my case, as a man, we're in a consumption society, and what isn't taught to us is the unlearning process, right? Instead of consuming, removing the layers, the shame, the guilt, the past trauma that might be keeping us from living to our potential, and essentially burning it. But burning it ceremonially, not with anger, but with reverence, because it kept us safe. and it kept us functioning, and it's part of our legacy and part of our story, but it doesn't have to inhibit us from
Yeah,
progressing
absolutely.
anymore.
And what comes to my mind when I read your poem is also, in order to embrace the new you, in order to level up into a higher self, you need to let go of who you once were and the things that perhaps are holding you back, right? That past, like you said, it's part of your story, but it doesn't have to hold you and be your full identity and define you anymore. Is that also some of the message that you wanted to share with that?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, really, we come into this world with, let's call it different lessons, different challenges, different obstacles. And it's only our personal responsibility to deal with it, to solve it, so that we can really experience bliss, to really experience perhaps what we experienced as infants and children, which is sort of this
Mm-hmm.
perfect life beyond suffering, right? Adulthood is going to bring suffering regardless, but we can transcend it. And we have to take personal responsibility, because being the victim and blaming the system and blaming other people and blaming our families, that's never going to get us unstuck.
That's right. And how do you go from that victim mentality then, right? From that bubble that we grow up in to break free from those limitations, from that story we've been telling ourselves for a long time?
It's a good question. I think it's just an inward process, right? We live in an external culture where we're always reaching for love, we're always reaching for validation, we're always reaching for wealth. We're always looking for things outside of ourselves, but all the answers are within us, right? You know, even the Bible talks about the kingdom of God being inside us. God is within us, right? Our higher self is within us. The truth is within us. Our potential is within us. The capacity to love as a way of life is within us. But going inward is very scary to a lot of people, including myself. There were times when I would look at my pain and I would immediately divert, right? It's almost like you look at it and then you look away. And that could be the simplest
Mm-hmm.
distraction. It could be a scratch on my arm, right? I didn't want to look at it. And there were times where I forced myself to look at it. And then I remember saying to myself, I'd rather somebody physically torturing me than feeling this emotional pain. And for a lot of people, I'd imagine that's what it's like. They would rather, and this is probably why, you know, there's people that cut themselves, and people put themselves, a lot of men will do very risky endeavors, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's a way to, and sometimes it's a way to distract yourself from the real pain, the real program that's running internally. But it's not until we face it and we stay there in the fire and we look at it and we heal it, and we'll likely need help along the way. It's really hard to do it by yourself, but ultimately it is our personal responsibility to look at it and heal it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what comes to my mind when you say that is also avoidance. How many of us would rather ignore the problem, ignore our own pain, like you're saying, to not have to deal with it because that's the hard part, right? Or I was having a conversation with someone recently and they shared how they started a relationship, everything was going great. Everybody thought that this was going to be like the most beautiful love story as well from an outside perspective. And then all of a sudden he just ended it out of the blue. And my girlfriend was very confused because she was like, I don't know what possibly went wrong. And to me, that sounds like someone who cannot communicate what they're going through. And instead of facing it right on, they just ran away from it. They just avoided the
Hmm.
problem, right? So I feel like many people, we've all been there at one point where we decided to walk away, to step back, but getting closer to our truth, being people with more integrity means that we need to face that, whether it's uncomfortable or not. And also, it's about treating people the right way, right? Because you don't want someone to do that to you. So it begins by practicing yourself and hoping also to attract more like minded people when you're living that truth to yourself and to others.
I love that point, because really what's going on internally is just a reflection, right? Or what's going on externally is a reflection of what's going on internally. So in other words, if you're afraid to confront yourself, as we're talking about, how can you deal with confrontation outside yourself? It's impossible, right? So if I have a fear of looking at my stuff, of looking at my guilt, at my shame, at whatever it is, my trauma, then how can I deal with life in a functional, mature, emotionally advanced way? It won't happen, right? So really to unlock all the beauty of life, all the keys of life, all of the codes that make us demigods, we must transcend the trauma, right? And then what will happen is we elevate. And then the people, like you described, this man who I have compassion for, he's probably going through a lot of pain. And I was one of those guys that ran away from love, that ran away from confrontation, right? So I get it. That's how men deal with things, unfortunately. Not all men, of course. Um, but it really is, we have to elevate ourselves consciously. So when we do that, we earn sort of this new level of consciousness where those people that you described, they won't even be attracted to us, right? These are universal laws. The law of attraction is we attract what we are, not what we want, right? So if I'm living in a depressive, anxious state and I'm trying to manifest this man of my dreams or woman of my dreams who's on this level, it's not going to happen. You'll get a derivative of that, but he or she will likely be struggling in some capacity the way you're struggling. That's just the way it is. So there's so many fruits at the end of this if we're willing to do the work. It's hard. It's messy. We have to light ourselves on fire, as the poem says. But if we're not doing that, what are we doing? If we're not doing that, we're suffering. We're struggling. We're confused. We're entangled in ourselves, right? We're constantly going to be fighting from our back in life if we don't go in and correct ourselves. And it all lives in the body, right? It lives in our nervous system, and our brain is either a master or a slave. And if it's our master and it's filled with negative thoughts, that's going to lead to negative emotions, and our body will become distorted, literally, physically. It will become dysfunctional, right? There's always an emotional reason behind our physical ailments. And then we'll just live a life where we're a filler, right? It's kind of a strong word to say there's people that are fillers. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but they're people that are functional. They might have families, they might have a good job, but they're never quite content because they never unlocked their potential. Their dreams were never fulfilled. Their capacity to truly love deeply, profoundly, their capacity to build a real relationship with God and their higher self was never unlocked. So if Earth is a classroom, they never passed. So I'm here to tell the audience that the work is hard and it's messy, but it's absolutely worth it. It's because it's what God wants us to do.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That was beautifully said. And Robert, one of my goals with this conversation, with this podcast, is to understand men a little bit better. I'm a woman. I do a lot of women's work. I love helping women be more confident and, be the best version of themselves, embrace their light, share who they are. Um, and I understand many of the struggles that women go through, but I want to learn more about the men's psyche, what men go through. So, my question for you is, what are common struggles that you see in men that most women do not understand or realize?
That's such a good question. I can't speak for every man, of course, but I could speak based off of my own experience. I run several men's groups. I've been doing that for a long time, and I coach men. So this is my answer to that question. Masculinity and manhood are two different things, right? So one can call himself a man by his very nature, but when one cannot be masculine until he proves this to himself, his peers, and ultimately women, right? So masculinity, therefore, is a journey. It's a conquest the man must embark upon. And I won't speak for women, right? But I think it's different. You know what I mean, right? So femininity is already claimed by nature, whereas masculinity must be earned, right? So think about it this way. As you said, women have their own burden, which I won't speak to. But the burden of a man is providing and protecting. And that comes with much work and much entrainment, right? I'm not just born to provide. I'm not just born to protect, right? I have to learn. I must learn how to do both. So I must build myself up so I can build my family and I could build my community and I could build my business and then I could build true personal power. But I have to go and build. It's not just provided to me, right? No one's going to just choose me because I'm a nice guy, right? There is a certain expectation of if there's problems in our home, in our community, in the world, which we've seen, right? The world could become dangerous overnight. Can my man protect me, right? Or if
Mm-hmm.
if we have children and a family, can my man provide, right? And if I never get off the
Absolutely.
couch and
Mm-hmm.
I become obese, I become invisible to women. And believe it or not, there's a lot of men in the world, and this is maybe where women, I'll give you a sneak peek. A majority of women are invisible to women because they haven't built themselves up. They haven't gone out and done the work. And that's why they say men don't, why do men take so long to mature? Why don't men commit like when women want to commit in their 20s? Because a good man is building. He's focused on his career, right? He's focused on building his muscle and building his brand and building whatever it is so that he has set himself up and doesn't have to worry about it. So in summary, right, we have to claim our masculinity. Our gender, our sex defines us as men, but that's not enough. We really have to go out there and earn it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That was a really interesting perspective on manhood and masculinity. And I can totally see that. And something that comes to my mind from a perspective, for something that happened to me when I was younger, when I was in my early 20s, I remember I went on a date with a guy. And back then, I was just starting my self development journey, just getting to truly know myself. And he asked me on the date, Celeste, what is your favorite thing about you on it, like, uh, internally, your personality? And then I want to know what is your favorite thing about you externally, your physical attributes. And when he said that, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know the answer because I hadn't developed a strong relationship with myself just yet. My self awareness wasn't there just yet. And I was still trying to figure out who I was. So that was such an awakening for me because I said, there's no way I never will be able to answer a question like that when it's about me, right? If I don't know what I love most about myself, that means that my self love is not there. And how can I love someone when I'm still struggling to love me? So I think you make a really, really good point, and that applies both to men and women, right? For us to fully be in our relationship, be committed, and be there for someone, we need to learn how to be there for us. We need to figure out who we are because a partner doesn't complete us, right? We are complete on our own and we complement each other. We should make each other better. We should lift each other up. What are your thoughts on that?
I 100% agree. I used to think in my younger days marriage was stupid, right? Bill Burr has a bit, the comedian, where he's like, if you told me I would jump out of a plane and there was a 55% chance that the parachute wouldn't open, I'd be an idiot to take those odds, right? And I used to think that way. I'd be like, it's almost a 60% divorce rate. Why would anybody do this? As I've gotten older, I realize that people that are getting married haven't done the work. So marriage itself as a sacrament is beautiful. It creates order in society. But when we come to that situation needy, right? If we come to that situation incomplete, if we haven't done the work, then it's only a matter of time before our wounds open and we bleed all over each other. And then we won't be
Right.
able to 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 make it, let's say. So I agree with you. I think I would bet that a lot of people listening, their parents or at least one of their parents have let them down one way or another, right? And that's life because my parents had me in their late 20s, and if I had a child in my late 20s, I'd be clueless, right? So they did the best that they could and their intentions were pure. But of course, they're going to make mistakes and they're going to cause wounds in their children, right? Now, we could carry those wounds forward or we could break the pattern. In order to break the pattern, we got to do the work. And we have to father ourselves and we have to mother ourselves. Our mothers and our fathers are never going to change. They're never going to make amends for the things that they did to us as children. Most of the time, they don't even know they did damage, right? So we have to tap into that inner power, that inner mother, that inner father, and say, you know what? I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to figure it out for myself. And sure, I'll seek help along the way, mentors, groups, right? That's great, therapy. But ultimately, we have to put on our big boy pants and our big girl pants, and we have to do it for ourselves. When we come into the relationship complete, now our capacity to love is unlocked. And we're not going to want to cheat. We're not going to want to stray. We're not going to want to break away and run away like that man did to your friend, right? Because our capacity is there. We're loving. We have this Christ consciousness that's unlocked in us. We'd never abandon our family. We'd never abandon our partner. We'd never cheat because of lust, because we've done the work. It doesn't mean we're perfect, right? We're flawed. We're going to make mistakes, but we have this emotional awareness to navigate through the hardships of a relationship.
That's right. That's right. Beautifully said there. And something that you said that I want to touch upon is we need to learn to mother and father ourselves. That is something I just learned a few years ago through continuing doing my own self development. And this idea of, as an adult, right, we're no longer little kids, so we can't run to mommy and daddy when we fall down, when something, I mean, obviously we have a support system that, we're not alone. We can have people that help us get through things, but ultimately when we're a bit upset, when something happens, that inner voice, right, that relationship with ourselves, we still have, I like to think that I still have that little girl inside of me even as an adult. And when something happens that makes me sad, that breaks my heart, or just a difficult time, how would I talk to my future child? How do I talk to myself during those moments of hardships, now that I'm moving forward in my career, in my relationships? And it's it's definitely more of an art than a science. So do you have any tips for anybody who, let's say it's your first time ever hearing, you need to learn how to mother and father yourself as an adult as you
Mm.
go through new things? How can someone start doing that?
Oh, such a good question. The first thing is you have to forgive. We all have to forgive the past. And forgiveness, I remember I was doing another podcast, and the woman that was interviewing me said, "Do you think you have to forgive in order to move on from the past?" I said, "100%, absolutely." I go, "But most people misunderstand forgiveness." My definition of true forgiveness, and this is based
Mm-hmm.
off my own experiences, is the following. You forgive the person, and as a result, you love them more than you did before, right? So let's say
Yes, that's
in
true.
the most extreme case, you're sexually abused by a parent, right? You forgive them so much that you see the pain that they're in. This is really hard for some listeners to maybe understand this, and I get it. You see that they've been hurt. You see perhaps their story of why they did that to you, and you can empathize with them. You can show compassion for them, and you can love them more, even in their presence when you look in their eyes, than you ever did before. It's a really hard place to get to, but that's true forgiveness. If you haven't been able to do that, and it doesn't mean you have to have closure with that person but journal about it, write about it, right? Burn it, whatever you have to do, whatever ceremony you have to do to be at peace with the past, especially with your parents. That will then give you the foundation to begin to mother and father yourself. And from there, honestly, Celeste, it's like doing things that you're scared of as a man. Like for me, it's
Yeah.
like my father wasn't there to protect me. Okay. I was scared a lot. So now I'm a man and I don't want to be scared anymore. So I'm going to do that thing that scares me. And the more I do that thing that scares me, the more, right? I could say, you're safe. You're safe. And maybe the mothering is spending time with your inner child and nurturing little Celeste and nurturing little Robert and writing to that inner child, more of that feminine nurturing energy, right? Whatever it
Right.
takes, make it ceremonial, but really make peace with the past so you can be at peace in the present.
That's right. That's right. And you brought up a very, strong example with the sexual assault. So I just want to say something else just to add to that. In the best case scenario, right, you forgive and you keep the relationship going. Hopefully this person has changed. But I think there will also be scenarios where they hurt you in the past, and if they're still hurting you today, right, you should still forgive them for what they did to you. But there may also be scenarios where you can choose to cut that relationship. You can forgive them. You want to let go of that shame, of that hate, of that whatever you feel, in your case. But best case scenario is that this person has changed for the better, and now you could have somewhat of a healthy relationship. But if that person is still hurting you today, I would encourage you to cut that relationship. You can forgive, move on, but you do not have to keep nurturing something. Obviously, that is someone that is not treating you well, that if they do not respect you, or if they're still trying to hurt you today, right?
I'm so glad you brought that up. Sometimes you're cutting energetic ties, sometimes you're cutting physical ties, and sometimes you're cutting both. But yes, respect your boundaries and do what's right for you. Absolutely.
Yep, yep. No, thank you for sharing that. I think that was really great overall how you shared on how we can begin to mother and father ourselves, and I think a it makes you a stronger person to be able to get through things on your own, and be to able to self soothe and be self aware about what you need during those times. So thank you for sharing that. And
Absolutely.
okay, next question for you. So I know you do a lot of coaching, right? You help men and women get to that next level of of their lives and to heal in different ways. And I've seen you write about true genius consciousness. I think you've
Mm.
also referred to it as Christ consciousness. I don't know if it's the same thing, but I would love for you to explain what that means to you.
Yeah. So to me, the true genius has nothing to do with intellect or little to do with intellect. To me, true genius is divine intelligence, let's call it divine guidance, divine creativity. So this is like you see people that are on like an extreme creative wave, right? You see people like Nikola Tesla, Nietzsche, you got Albert Einstein. They were tapping into something, and it starts with the imagination, right? Carl Jung talks about the active imagination as a way to uh, individuate the conscious and the unconscious, which is where genius is, right? There's so much information in our unconscious about who we are and our potential
Mm-hmm.
and why we're here. But a lot of us can't tap into it. And it's a shame because 95% of the information within our program, in our vessel, is in our subconscious. I read something like 98% of our thoughts are the same thoughts as they were the day before. We just think the same thing. So
I've
if we're
heard
just
that too.
staying, yeah, so if we're just in our conscious mind, we're limited. All the juices in the subconscious. So genius is being able to assimilate the unconscious into the conscious. Now, how do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
Self mastery, right? It's first relieving the past, as we talked about, and then relieving judgment. Maybe you make a mistake. Maybe you screw up at work. So what? Right? You could just witness it. Maybe your relationship doesn't work out. You could feel those emotions, but you don't have to judge it. You don't have to hang on to it, right? So we let go of the negative thoughts. We let go of the stored emotions and we create a clean vessel so that the noise in our body and the noise in our mind begins to go down and the signal begins to go up. It's like a radio station, right? The old fuzzy radios, you would change the dial. We could get that clear. But we have to be willing to do that work to align with that genius that's not coming from us, it's coming from source, which has been, I mean, even Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
He knew. They knew the magic. This is what shamans have always done. They know how to work with the magic of the universe, right? Tesla was out in nature. He was never in a relationship because he's like, I am getting way too much information out here. I don't want anybody to disrupt this antenna, this signal. And he just, wrote thousands of books and came up with maybe hundreds, came
Mm-hmm.
up with inventions, right? So that's available to us, but there's an entrainment, there's a daily practice, there's
Mm-hmm.
a cleansing, right? It is a deprogramming, and then we could tap into that genius, and we can speak fluidly. We could speak from the soul. We don't have to think and stop and him and ha and things like that. We could write great poetry. We can paint great art. We could do great architecture. We could become, in a sense, supernatural. Not God, not like God himself. I don't like when people say we are God. I don't believe that, but we are God-like. We are created in the image of God, just like God created us through his imagination as we understand it.
Mm-hmm.
We can create from our own imagination, and it's endless. But are you willing to align with that source? That's the work.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And I love the point you brought up about letting go of judgment or labels, right? As we're going through things. And that is definitely something we all need to work on, because I think ever since we're little kids, we are bombarded with judgments and labels, and you can do this but you can't do that. Or as a parent, I'm good at this but I'm not good at that, therefore you're good at this or not. Right, hundreds of examples we could bring up. But what comes to my mind and I want to ask you is, let's say we go through a breakup, we go through some difficult situation in our lives, and grieving is part of it,
Mhm.
right? Grieving is part of it. You broke up with someone, you lost a job, you had a death in the family. There's many things that can happen to us. And there's a little bit of time where you will be upset, you will go through various emotions, but there's a fine line where you need to make sure you don't stay in the victim mindset, because perhaps you were victimized, right? This did happen to you, this did hurt, this was terrible indeed, and it did affect you. But what is that sweet point between letting it affect you versus going years now
Mm.
and not letting it go? And that, to me, it reminds me a lot about the judgment thing that you brought on. So I think it's a mindset, it's a practice. How do you practice letting go of that judgment so that you can free yourself from
Mm.
judging yourself and also judging others?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is a practice of, I think, remaining calm. Like the example that you just shared, what comes to me is the person that broke up with that person, although there was love there, right? For sure. There's also a level of, I'm never going to meet anyone else again. I'm never going to have that again. So fear, right? Everything's fear or love. But when we put things in perspective, like let me give you an analogy, right? Like let's say you and your future husband, you have a child and they're 16 years old and she's going to the prom and she brings him home and it's her first boyfriend, right? And you're eating at the dinner table and they're lovey-dovey and she's the happiest girl in the world. In her mind, she thinks that that boy is going to be, they're going to ride off into the sunset like most teenage girls, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you and your husband go back to the bedroom at night, you kind of know it's unlikely they're going to make it, right? And from your perspective, it's like, okay, I just hope she doesn't get hurt. But you know she's going to get hurt. This is
Mm-hmm.
life, right? This is the risk we take when we get into a relationship. Hearts get broken. But you also know from a parent's point of view, she's going to be okay, right? She's 16. This happened to me. This happened to you. And look at us now. I'm your eighth or ninth boyfriend, maybe, or fourth or fifth girlfriend. But we made it. Like this is life. But when we're in it, we don't have that perspective. And I think it's really important when we're in those moments to feel it and grieve it because this is part of the process. But at some point, we got to step back as the witness and say, was that really the relationship that I deserved? Was that really the man or woman that I thought I was going to wind up with? Wasn't there red flags there? Or maybe it was great, but doesn't God have a plan for me? Isn't there someone else that I could love? Right? We have to put things in perspective, and I know it's hard when we're going through it, but we allow time to take us through this process, just like nature, right? The sun is always going to shine again. The spring and the fall are going to come. Our hearts will heal. Time will do its thing. If we're stuck in it and we're not letting the seasons pass, It's because of our own fear, maybe our own regret, maybe our own conditioning that we're not enough, maybe our own ego. So we really have to work on this emotional mastery. And I think it helps when we put things in broader perspectives and not be stuck in lower perspectives. There's only one person for me in this lifetime. He or she was the only person that would have made me happy. How could that be? There's 8 billion people in the world, right?
Right.
Easier said than done, but that's
Yeah.
my thought.
Absolutely. I love that. And I really hope everybody listening really paid attention to that. It's that mindset of things are going to happen to us. People are going to walk out of our lives. Our dream career we really wanted may fall through the cracks. But remember that, like Robert said, right? God has a plan for you. And if he's removing someone out of your life or he's taking something away, that means that something is better is coming. So don't let that destroy you. Don't let that moment define where your life can go, because as long as you're living and as long as you wake up every day, there's something beautiful that can come into your life, but it all depends on the mindset that you hold. And it's okay to be upset. It's okay to grieve. We all need to go through that. We're not robots, right? We have emotions, but don't let it destroy you. Pick yourself back up. Do the work that Robert is mentioning and build that practice of fathering, mothering yourself. And remember that something greater is always coming ahead. So I just wanted to build on that beautiful message you shared there, Robert. We're having such an amazing conversation. I'm really enjoying this topic. Um, but I'm going to go ahead and ask you our last question for today, which is, at this point, I know you have done a lot in your life. You've met many people. You have coached many people and gotten to see different stories, levels of happiness, success. So, what does success mean to you now?
Mm, authenticity. Authenticity. I mean, if you're successful and you're not being authentic to who you are, if you're doing it for the wrong reason, if you're trying to make money so you can show off, that's not authentic, right? If you're working and you're doing what you love and you feel good doing it, and that's authentic, people will gravitate towards you. You'll get everything that you want in life. And the last thing I'll say on success is tie it to a bigger purpose. You know, when people manifest money, if I said, hey, God, give me money, I want yachts and I want half naked women hanging out on them. You're not tapping into Christ consciousness when you ask that. You're tapping into something and you might get it. That's when people say he or she has done a deal with the devil, right?
Hmm.
You could get it that way, but it's not going to work out well for you because it's not
Hmm.
authentic.
That's right.
If I say, God, I want to manifest abundant wealth because I want to build a healing center to help the suffering people in your name, in your will. Money will come so quickly, you wouldn't even know what to do with it because it's tied and tethered to God's will. Do that. Pay it forward. If you make money, use it for something that the world needs for the greater good, and everybody will win.
Absolutely. I love that. That's beautifully said. Going back to having a greater purpose, having something that's guiding you with all the work you do. And I know you have beautiful poems on that as well. You have great posts on that. So I would encourage you all to follow Robert, connect with him. If you're interested in working with him directly, I'll be sharing his information in the show notes. Robert, it has been an absolute pleasure having this conversation. It makes me happy to see role models like you in life, so that men can be better, to believe that there's better people out there, that we can all continue to grow. And thank you again for sharing your beautiful message with us today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Celeste.
Thank you. You have just finished listening to this episode, and I hope you're feeling inspired, enlightened, and ready to take the next step to accomplish your goals. Make sure to check out the show notes for any information shared, And if this message impacted you, please share this wisdom with at least one person you care about, and let's grow this movement across the globe. Always remember that the light to success is you, my friend. Until next time.